What's going on? It's time for another episode of Too Hard for the Radio, transmitting from the future free state of Greater Idaho. I am the one armed madman. And with me today, we've got Terry Adair. Terry, it's a pleasure to have you. We've been chatting a little bit about Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne and Zach Wild before the podcast. So I think we're going to get along just fine here.
Good way to start. I appreciate that. We have at least a few things in common. Your "Don't Tread on Me" flag and
Yep.
some hard driving rock and roll.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
that is some of the best music ever. I grew up in the era of the '70s, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah.
So I'm doing great, and I thank you very much for having me on your podcast today. I really appreciate
No problem. And we're going to discuss one of my
it.
absolute favorite topics to discuss on the podcast, which is the Fermi paradox, which I could go on about the Fermi paradox all day. It's just something. So, why don't you tell us a little bit about your book right off the bat, and then we'll get into it.
I really thank you for that. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Fermi paradox because I believe that you and your listeners are going to hear a little bit of different take on the Fermi paradox.
Excellent, because they've heard
And
my take on it a lot.
yes, yeah. Um, well, this will be a little bit different from, and my idea. I have a hypothesis in the book. If you see the front cover of the book, it talks about the Fermi paradox is answered, and that's my answer to the Fermi paradox. And it also describes in the book the Adair hypothesis, and the Adair hypothesis is sort of my foundational idea, and it is a scientific hypothesis, and a lot of people think that a hypothesis is a wild arse guess. It's not. A hypothesis should have some basis in science, and as such, I welcome all challengers. I want people to tear this thing apart. That no, you're wrong here, and no, that's not right. I want to hear that because that's how science advances. And so, since this is a relatively new idea, a new take on the Fermi paradox, it should be able to withstand any robust challenge to it, and that's what I want. As you and your listeners well know, you've already discussed this. I hear that already. The Fermi paradox was offhandedly mentioned some 70 years ago by Enrico Fermi. But it's the same paradox that we all have. We all own this same paradox. Each of us has stood out in the night sky, looked up all of the masses of stars out there, and have thought to ourselves or discussed it amongst each other, is there anybody else out there? And most of us feel that there probably is, that there's just too many stars. And when Enrico Fermi offhandedly asked this question, that wasn't his main endeavor in life. He was a particle physicist. And so, if those of you are familiar with particle physicists, there's a whole subcategory of subatomic particles called fermions. That's what he did, and those bear his name. And then 10, 12 years later, Frank Drake sort of formalized that idea in a
Mhm.
mathematical equation called the Drake equation. But both of those hinge on one idea: where is everybody? And when those questions are asked, it's not where are the bacteria? Where are the phytoplankton? They want to know where the people are. That's what they're
Yeah,
specifically asking about.
yeah,
So it's not just is there life elsewhere in the universe, and we largely assume that there is, but where are the creatures, the beings who are advanced, similar to where we are, who have the capability to create what we now call a technosignature, or some sort of radio signal, or some sort of man-made signal out into the universe. We're pointing these giant
CFCs.
telescopes.
You know,
Yeah,
CFCs
exactly.
is a big one.
Yeah, yeah. So we're projecting our presence out there. So when these were initially more seriously thought of in scientific terms, we didn't even know. We hadn't even seen an actual planet. We just assumed that there were because of our understanding how stars form and how planets must form, et cetera. Obviously, that turned out to be correct because now, 60 some years later, we've seen thousands of them. And so now we know that part is true. So even when Frank Drake formalized that, and he had that in there, there has to be planets, et cetera.
Mhm.
He hadn't seen them. Fortunately, he lived long enough to see them, which was great. He was very active in the SETI movement which is still going on, up until like 2022 or something like that, when he passed away, which was pretty recently. He was in his 90s, so he saw a lot of this advancement in technology. So the Fermi paradox is such. we know now that there are trillions of stars in our universe. Those 2 were primarily focused on the Milky Way galaxy because interstellar travel is realistic. Intergalactic probably is not.
Mhm.
But let's start with that. We have 400 billion suns to work with already, so that's a good place to start. So that's kind of our neighborhood. The Milky Way is 100,000 light years across, so it's a big chunk of galactic real estate. But within that are 400 billion stars. And so the idea is that amongst those stars, surely there must be the conditions that lead to intelligent life somewhere else out there. Yet we haven't seen it. That's where the paradox comes in. It's what we expect versus what we've seen. This is in no way designed to take away from anyone's own experience or anyone else's own encounters or what they've seen visually. I'm not that's not where I'm going. I'm just talking about in a minute my take on the Fermi paradox. So if you or some of your audience have experienced some of those things, that's fine. My idea focuses on the energy to make that happen.
Mhm. Yeah, man. It sure is a strange deal. Like, I like to discuss it in 2 separate categories. Like, I
Okay.
think that there's a good way. The question is bigger on one side than the other, but, like, I like to discuss it based on I've had people on here that think faster than light travel is possible. I've had people that don't think it's possible, and I think that there's an interesting conversation to be had with both of those possibilities. I'm kind of torn on it, like, I'm not a physicist. I can't do equations, like, I don't know if it's, possible or not. I like to assume that it's not just for the sake of argument because, like, even if it is in some case, like, let's say that it is possible, it seems to be rather hard to figure out. Like, we're pretty good at science at this point, and we haven't figured anything like that out. So it would be a good argument to say that, like, even if it is possible or isn't possible, there would be civilizations out there that have not figured it out as well. So then you get into the aspect of, like, slow crawling across the galaxy, and they've done thought experiments, and I think there's been papers written about this to where, like, you could colonize an entire galaxy in a million years at 1% of light speed. You build a big ship, you travel to one star, that ship builds another ship, and then it just keeps branching and branching and branching, and over about a million years you should be able to colonize an entire galaxy. And at some point, you would think, especially if faster than light travel is not possible, you would start seeing Dyson swarms. You would start seeing large swaths of galaxies being, dimmed by these massive energy gathering, apparatuses that are surrounding different stars. And we don't see any of that, which is just so strange.
I love your take on it. There's a lot of good stuff there. So let me talk a little bit about the traveling faster than the speed of light. Nor am I a physicist, but it is the consensus of the scientific community that faster than speed of light travel is not possible. And there's a number of reasons why. And it's interesting. And not only do I love science, I love the history of science. The people who figured things out over the years, their experiments are so elegant. And many of them have held up for hundreds of years. And the speed of light was derived by a number of sort of rudimentary but pretty sophisticated ways of determining the speed of light. And over the centuries, they tended to concur with each other within just a small percentage of each other. And then Maxwell came along
Yeah.
and others, and he created equations that independently determine the speed of light. And that's the very nature of our universe. And you said something that a lot of people won't necessarily agree on and maybe push back a little bit, that we're not that advanced at technology. I'm with you. I say we are. Just because we don't have Jetson mobiles yet, little things that buzz around brrr, and some sort of little exhaust or something comes out and they fly around. It's not because we're not smart, because physics doesn't work that way. And that's what we found out over the last 70 years, that you can't drive a rocket ship or a jet to the grocery store. That doesn't work. So it's
Yeah.
not it's one thing to propel something, it's quite another to control it and stop it. So
And the
l
only thing,
uh,
like, really stopping us from having, like, a sci-fi style civilization at this point is, our preferences on where we spend our time and energy. We could build a Dyson swarm right now with the technology that we have. It's not that hard to do. It would just take a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of money, and the will to do it. If we ran into some sort of problem, we could be out in the solar system right now, I believe, with the technology that we have. It's just something that we don't spend a lot of time and money on.
that's a good point, and I've been looking for an opportunity to kinda take down the Dyson sphere,
Sure.
idea,
Yeah, yeah. I
because
don't think the sphere is a thing, but I do think like a
the
swarm
swarms, right,
of
okay,
yeah.
right. Yeah, and that was sort of how he originally thought it.
Mhm.
Let's go back just one quick step. In the early 1960s, we rightfully so had a lot of scientific swagger and bravado. We split the atom.
Yeah.
We traveled the speed of light. Pardon me, the speed of sound. Were launching creatures and eventually humans into space, into orbit. We had satellites out there. We were planning to send people to the moon. And so at that time, it was imagined if you can think it, you can do it. Physics strikes back. And that's why we don't have flying cars. Not because it's not a great idea, it is.
Yeah,
It
it's
can't be
just not
done.
economical, it's not feasible. You would have just a
So
mess of all over cities, it would be a nightmare.
well, I mean, even if you could manage the traffic,
Yeah,
I'm talking about the craft themselves.
sure.
We don't have them because they're not feasibly
Yeah.
to you can't build them in the way people imagine them to be able to be
Yeah,
built.
and the energy aspect of it is very difficult. Like, it's hard to use an internal combustion engine for something like that unless you're going to have like a forward facing prop or a jet engine. And
Right,
it just
right.
turns out that it's easier to build tunnels to move mass amounts of people. It's
There you
easier
go.
to have cars to move mass amounts of people. Like, it's just
Right.
one of those things where
I
it does bother me that more people don't have airplanes. Like, I have an airport right next to my house, and it kind of bothers me that airplanes are so expensive that like families aren't able to afford them. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah, but I think it fits into what we're talking about,
Sure.
and you touched on it very, very critically. There's two factors here, and they both have to be satisfied to some degree or another, and that's energy and economics.
Hmm.
So you have the energetics and the economics. That determines everything. And you also have something that's called the law of diminishing return.
Yes.
So what that states in a couple of ways, let's just say that you're after unobtainium and it's some sort of energy supply in some way. And I really want to dive into that energy because that's my whole book is centered on that. So you have unobtainium, it's somewhere in the soil, right? And you can drive energy out of it. Well, if at some point you're going deeper and deeper and the unobtainium is harder to get, either economically or energetically, you stop doing it.
Hmm.
So energetically means that it takes more energy to get the unobtainium than it can yield back. That's simple. That's a no-brainer. That's partly what Dyson swarm is. So I'm going to go back to that.
Okay.
Then the other one is the economic part of it, because you're right. Society has to decide how we're going to spend our resources, and there's two ways to do it, either privately or publicly,
Hmm.
right? And we're starting to see, and we have throughout the years, where you have large capitalists who have money, and they kind of take chances on these ideas, and so both of those have to be satisfied in one way or another. So the universe is rigidly transactional, and there's a real misunderstanding, or an incomplete understanding, might be a better way of saying it, of what energy is and how it can be used. That's the whole thing. Having an abundance of energy is completely different than having an abundance of useful energy.
Yes.
Useful energy has to do work for you. And so let me talk about two different things that people can probably relate to, and I'll tie in a few different ideas here before I get specifically into the Dyson spheres,
Hmm.
or Dyson swarm is more correct. So lightning is a great example of energy. No one can deny it's energy, right? And it happens because there's a voltage potential. All energy is an exchange from high energy to low energy. All of it is.
Hmm.
And there's lots of different forms of energy, but we can't necessarily capture, harness, and turn that energy into useful work. No one's going to argue that we're going to go out and set up lightning traps and collect lightning to power the grid. It can't be done. So you have an immense amount of energy that's out there that's particularly not usable. So you have to intervene in that energy gradient and capture some of it and turn it into work. Otherwise, the fact that it's energy is meaningless to us. So here's an example. You have a river, water's running downhill. You have a gravitational potential difference. That's what's happening. The water is just the carrier of the energy.
Yeah.
It doesn't create the energy, it just carries the energy. And so if this water is running downhill, you could put a wheel out there and capture some of that energy and you can do useful work with it, right? You can use it as a mill. And that's how it was used, or you can use it to spin pulleys in a factory or something like that. So that water is giving you useful work. So what's happened in the river is you're not capturing all the water, right? You're only capturing a portion of it. And then some of the energy is lost through frictional heat, right? Heat waste, that's entropy. And so even the energy of the water, you can't capture all of it. Well, at the bottom, the water is not moving anymore. So you've extracted all of the energy out of it. But that also can be used to turn a turbine.
Hmm.
Now, a regular river is not going to be effective enough, but if you have a dam now in a lake that's above and you can run the water through the penstock and you can turn a turbine, that creates electricity. So you've intervened on that gradient, right? So you've taken the energy out of that water because at the bottom it just sits there. It doesn't do anything else.
Hmm.
It's still at that point. So you've intervened and you've captured some of that energy from the falling water. And now you've turned it into a different energy. The universe is rigidly transactional and rigid in its bookkeeping. Energy can never be created nor destroyed. Our universe is considered a closed system, and so all the energy and matter is contained within. You can neither create nor destroy either one of those. You can just change their
Yeah.
forms.
Transform it.
And so all the stuff that you don't use or is lost is just heat waste. It's just entropy.
Hmm.
So that energy has been transferred to something else. And so now you have electricity running through a circuit. Well, that electricity isn't doing work itself. It's losing energy through transmission losses,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Most of our
It,
energy is lost in heat waste.
entropy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I was an
exactly.
electrical lineman, so you're speaking my language here.
I know I was. That's
Yeah.
why
Yeah.
I'm
Perfect.
specifically using this analogy because
Perfect.
you're familiar with
Yep.
this. And so now that can be used to turn on a light bulb. That's a form of work, right? So you're moving those electrons, you're heating them up, and so using light is one of the most common use of just a sheer number of electricity use is to turn a motor. Almost all of our now we heat things up, right? We
Hmm.
need to heat things up and we illuminate things, but the biggest use is to turn motors. That's what we do. So what happens when you're turning a motor or a light? Now something has to intervene on that flow of energy, right? That's what a circuit is. So that device that you're powering is intervening on that gradient flow. You're going from high voltage to low voltage. And so that's how energy works. And so another example of energy before I get to the Dyson swarm is antimatter and matter and antimatter.
Yeah.
People love that, right? You have antiproton, let's call it an antiproton, and a proton. When they come together, they release quote unquote pure energy. I don't know what that means to people.
Yeah.
And if it does, how do you turn that into useful work
Exactly.
now?
What are you gonna do? Heat a turbine?
Well,
What, heat
yeah,
some water in a turbine?
well, there
Doesn't
you
make
go.
any
You
sense.
possibly
Yeah,
can.
you
That's a good
could,
point. So
but
you've
you're
got
talking
that
about,
part of
like,
it.
such a huge energy expenditure to create the antimatter that there's no way you're gonna be able to use it usefully in a system like that, right?
You and your audience are way ahead. I
Yeah.
love this. You guys are ahead of the curve on that idea. That's exactly right. And so what happens is you get this pure energy. Well, that's not really what it is. What happens is when a proton, an antiproton, and a proton meet together, you create positive, negative, neutral pions that they decay right away into gamma radiation. Gamma radiation is highly
It's
penetrating, and
unuseful, yeah.
there's no good way to capture it.
Yeah.
It's the only thing you could potentially capture, just like you said, is the heat. So when a gamma ray interacts with other matter, it heats it up. You have neutrinos. Well, neutrinos play hide and seek.
Mhm.
You can't capture them at
Nope.
all. So they're gone. You have muons, they decay right away. And then you have other particles and photons that are released. So it's not like there's a single one type of energy that you're dealing with anyway. So you have a multitude of different energies, but you hit the very important thing that most people don't understand. There's no source of antiprotons.
Hmm.
They have to be created.
Yep.
And because of what we just talked about, the law of thermodynamics, the first and second laws of thermodynamics, is it takes more energy to create an antiproton than it will ever yield.
Hmm.
But you're just storing the energy for later use, just like a battery.
Yeah.
That's how batteries work.
Yeah, the Lawrence Livermore Lab, they have that big fusion laser experiment, and they had this big
Yes.
press release a couple years ago. It was like, "We created more energy than, you know, was required to put in the system." But then you read into it and it's like, "Oh, they didn't count the energy that was required to make the fuel pellet
To create
or
it.
the
Yeah.
lasers," you know?
Right.
Like, they were just counting the explosion itself, and also, like, there's no usable fusion method right now that would, like, use lasers because you're having to drop multiple fuel pellets into this system all that like it was a nuclear bomb experiment. It wasn't like an
Right.
energy experiment.
Right.
And it
Yeah.
was just this crazy press release that made no sense whatsoever. If you know a little bit about like what you're talking about, you can
Right.
just kind of pick that apart immediately and go, this is never going to work as an actual like energy generation method.
Right. So your group is easy to talk with because you've got them well educated on this
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's no there's all the energy is here. It can neither be created nor destroyed. The universe just doesn't offer that much of it into usable energy for us. Except we're going to get to the key things, and that's where I'm going to
Yeah,
kind of
and quickly, isn't it crazy that, like, normal people don't know this stuff? It's not difficult, you know? Like, y you just have to put a little bit of thought into it, and it's crazy to me that, like, so few people in our society, like, understand energy in any way whatsoever. They flip on the light switch, they give no thought whatsoever as to, like, where it comes from and how difficult it is to produce, and it's, you know, for all of human history, energy was a luxury and now it's just a requirement and people don't give two shits about where it comes from or how it's produced. You know, they're all in on windmills and solar panels and they don't think about like any of this stuff that we're talking about.
You just said what I've said 1,000 times. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
People turn on a light switch and they have no idea it's magic to them. They
Yep.
have no idea where it came from. There's not a source of electrons out there, people. There's not a mountain or a
Mhm.
well or a river of electrons. Every electron is created by a generator
Mhm.
or photovoltaics. So whether you're spinning a wind turbine or a hydroelectric turbine or a coal fire or what I love the most right now are the gas fired direct turbines,
Yeah, those
the
are nice.
combined cycle, gas turbines, which I'd
Yeah.
like to talk about a little bit. So, I don't wanna wander too far
Sure.
away from the Dyson Swarm, but I started the Fusion Star Project nonprofit as a energy literacy and policy initiative. So that's the most important. Yeah, I wrote this awesome book, but the book came out of the fact that people, you don't understand about energy. You don't know
Yeah.
how lucky we are. As I was saying earlier, the universe is very, very stingy on giving us useful energy. And when the Kardashev scale and Dyson sphere slash swarms were thought of, we were at the height of kind of energy bravado and swagger.
Yeah.
And those are just kind of thrown out there because if you can imagine it, you can do it.
Mhm.
So the Dyson swarm, the idea of it is, and your ability to capture your stars, your host star's energy will rank you on the Kardashev scale. Okay. So people are just neglecting to understand the scale of our own solar system and what it would actually take. So when I hear capture all the energy of the sun,
Yeah.
okay, that's a non sequitur
Mhm.
because there's not just an energy of the sun. Because first of all, the furnace of it is not little men shoveling coal, right? It's not a fire in there.
Mhm.
It's not even hydrogen combustion, which is what you hear about. Hey, we have a car, we have a car engine. I understand that you can run them by internal combustion, right? A regular hydrogen combustion engine or a fuel cell, right? So hydrogen acts as the energy battery, if you will. I don't want to say the energy source because there's not a source of hydrogen. Hydrogen has to be created,
Mhm.
people. So there's not a hydrogen well or hydrogen river. It's created, get this, from cracking methane. That's where it comes from. So that's an uncomfortable truth, but 85% of the world's hydrogen comes from methane. So no, methane is not coming out of the exhaust pipe. Water is, but the CO2 is coming out someplace else in a factory.
Yeah,
So that's where your
exactly.
hydrogen came from.
Yep.
Okay.
There's no free
So
lunch. There's
there's no
always
free lunch.
there's
Thank you
always a
for saying
cost.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
There's
always a
always a
cost.
cost.
Energetic or economics. It's
Yep.
got to be one of those two. So the idea is that you capture quote unquote all the sun's energy. Well, obviously we're not going to harvest the nuclear fusion products of the sun. That's just an impossibility, right? That's in the core of the sun. But what we can capture and what the sun freely gives is all the stuff that it's emitting. And all that stuff is not one thing. And that stuff has to come to reach us 93 million miles. And so what it emits, and this is interesting, I want to say this real quickly. When hydrogen is fused under immense gravitational force, okay, and you force hydrogen atom protons to become helium, right? You release gamma ray photons. And that gamma ray photon takes hundreds of thousands or even million years to reach the surface of the sun.
Mhm.
And it comes out in the whole spectrum of electromagnetic radiation. The low energy or long waves or radio on the far left, if you imagine that what you've seen in your science class, to the very high end of the cosmic rays. And if you walk backwards, you have gamma rays, you have X rays, you have ultraviolet, you have visible light, you have infrared, and so on to shorter ones. Okay. We can't do anything with those high energy waves. They're out.
Mhm.
Cosmic waves, gamma rays, X-ray. There's no practical way to harvest those and to use them as useful. We just talked about that. That's why I was kind
Mhm.
of building the story here.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. What we need is what Mother Nature already copied. We need that narrow band of visible light. The radio waves on the other end are too low in their energy. The other ones above ultraviolet and ultraviolet and X-rays and gamma rays, they're too energetic. In fact, they destroy matter. They embrittle it or they destroy it. They definitely tear organic material apart. That's
Mhm.
why you want to avoid radiation. Ionizing radiation harms us tremendously. The higher the dose, the higher the energy, the more harm it causes us. The radio waves pass right through us. We don't feel them at all. They basically don't interact with us. And that's why you can go into a building and listen to your cell phone because it's coming through those low energy waves that penetrate, but they don't really interact with stuff that much. So we need to capture that very narrow band of energetic photons from the sun. That's what photovoltaics are.
Mhm.
Putting them in space is more complicated. It's not easier. So
Yeah,
not only do you have
for sure.
to capture them, not only do you have to capture them in the same way, then you have to
Keep them
retransmit
there
them.
too, and you gotta keep them
Y-
there.
You have to retransmit, and you have to. So this is where entropy comes into it because entropy is the law of disorder. There's constant maintenance required
Mhm.
on this. So the closer you put them to the sun, the more you subject them to the high energy damaging rays. So if you were to say this, okay, let's go to near Mercury. Okay, you get 7 times the flux because photons from the sun and everywhere, they lose their intensity according to the inverse square law. So if you double the distance, you quarter the flux. So the closer you get to the sun, well, yeah, there's more to absorb. But still, it's the photovoltaics. It's the same stuff we're using right now. We've done a pretty darn good job of that. We're capturing about as much of the energy that falls on the sun as possibly can be gained. But if you then have this massive swarm in space, first of all, how do you get it there?
Mhm.
How do you assemble it? How do you collect it? And then how do you transmit it? You have to transmit it, you have to convert it into microwaves.
Yeah,
The microwaves
and
have
then
to
beam
beam
it.
down. And so you have a beam divergence, so you're giving them some energy. And
Mhm.
then you have these massive
Collectors.
collectors on
Yeah.
Earth.
Yep.
Okay. So you're sure you already know all this.
Yeah.
You're beginning to see this. Okay.
Yeah, and
So
I don't
now,
view it as a solution for energy
right.
on Earth. I think that when I think about a Dyson swarm, I think of a civilization that has begun to live in space, where you've
I
got
like that.
O'Neill cylinders, you've got orbital rings, you've got all kinds of different factories and foundries that are kind of not necessarily like surrounding the sun, but within the solar system. and
Right.
those are using, photovoltaics, like you said, to use energy. And like I look at it as something to where if we were to look at a civilization doing that right now, they might be blocking out like 5% of the sun. You know
Right.
what I mean?
Exactly.
Like
Thank you. Right.
not a massive amount, but enough to where we can look at the star and go, that star should be brighter than it is.
Okay. Right. I like that. So the other thing comes to just matter. Our sun owns 99% of the matter in the solar system.
Mhm.
So you have all the planets, all the moons, the comets, the asteroids. It's just stuff randomly floating around. That's actually less than 1% of the matter. You'd have to harvest every bit of matter in our solar system, and obviously you can't build Dyson sphere out of all of that. Some of
Yeah.
it you can, some of it
You'd
you
have to
can't.
completely disassemble Mercury in order to do it,
Y-
like the
Yeah,
entire planet.
yeah, but that just gives you blank
Yeah.
size of an array,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't know all the material on there that can be turned into the actual collector and
Mhm.
infrastructure for it. All that's limited. And so it's a great concept, and I do like your idea. You already have a space civilization,
Mhm.
and we're going to get how do you become a space civilization? Because I don't want to skip over that. That's the heart and soul of my book.
Yeah.
So how you get there is a different issue, but let's just say that you are there or you're getting closer. We are darn close, and you know what's going
Mhm.
to get us there? Hydrogen fusion. That's the bridge. Because once we've mastered hydrogen fusion, and we will, it will be on the grid within 30 years. I know that that's the perpetual saying, but we are legitimately that close right now. We have, and I like that this is being done in different countries, and there's different ways
Mhm.
of tackling it. And I think that once they finally kind of crack it, they're gonna say, "Oh, this is easy. We can make these a lot smaller." Ultimately, that's what's going to happen.
Mhm.
And so we're going to have nuclear fusion powering our cities more or less with unlimited amount of energy. I didn't say free. Some people think that that should be free. No, it costs money to build it, etc.
Mhm.
It takes money for the research. And so it will be unlimited, potentially unlimited energy for us. We
But
have a
you can
lot of
only go so
resources.
far with it because of the heat problem, and that's something to where if you've got unlimited energy, like you said, you can build a ton of fusion reactors, but at some point, like I'm not, one of these climate change freaks that thinks that the earth is going to boil and the oceans are going to boil in the next couple of years. But at some point when you do have access to unlimited energy, you can only go so far with it, and that's when you have to go out into space.
Right.
And you have to start doing work out there. You have to start putting your factories and your foundries out there because if you don't, like, you're going to start like affecting the planet in a serious way.
I'm glad you said that's a great segue to my next part. I'm glad that you and your audience have really kind of talked about that part of it a lot, because now we're going somewhere with energy, and people are getting maybe connecting some dots right
Mhm.
now
I
about.
actually don't think that a type 1 civilization is possible on just a planet. Like if you're generating that much energy, you're doing some serious damage to your atmosphere and you kind of have to go out into space in order to do it.
Yeah, you talked about the one thing that a lot of people sort of miss in their calculations, and that's the heat waste.
Mhm.
That's the entropy. That's the entry part of it.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're going to have to deal with that.
Yep.
And so I'm going to give you and your audience a little bit of an idea of just how much energy it takes to become advanced civilization. We are an advanced civilization because we have an enormous foundational understanding of how our universe operates.
Mhm.
If you've discussed the CERN reactor, the
Mhm.
Large Hadron Collider, that is the most sophisticated laboratory experiment ever created. It is unbelievable. And this upgrade that's undergoing right now, part of it, although the other things to gain with it, because it's going to get higher energy, and we're creating more sensitive detectors. Okay, we're probing to see if quarks are in fact a fundamental particle. Fundamental particles include electrons, quarks, neutrinos, antineutrinos. Those are fundamental particles, which means that if you chop them up, they don't get any smaller.
Mhm.
That's it. They're not made of anything else, which is weird because the protons and neutrons turned out to not be fundamental.
Yeah.
Protons and neutrons
Electrons are so weird, you know?
electrons are weird.
They're
They
so
are.
weird. It's a point, but it's also not a point. It kind of exists and it doesn't. They're so weird.
They are very weird. Well, someone more famous than I said it, but in a slightly different way, and I'll use this phrase: "Gold isn't made of gold." And that's the big surprise. Most of our matter is not matter, it's made of energy,
Yeah,
made of binding energy. And that's maybe a little bit further off than we want to go right now.
sure.
But that is remarkable. But the idea that we are probing this, what we now assume is to be the smallest elementary fundamental particles of the quarks. No one's even seen a proton before or an atom before. We've gotten close to sort of imaging them, but it's amazing that what we've discovered without actually being able to see them because they're so darn small. They're smaller than we can ever even comprehend. So what it takes to become a civilization, a advanced civilization, and I submit that we are. We've been doing this, creating this advanced civilization since about the 1800s. So at the end of the 1700s is when the coal-powered steam engines were
Mhm.
created. So we've been doing about 220 years. If you imagine, and all of us have experienced pulling up to a railroad crossing and seeing the arms come down, the lights are flashing, the bells are clanging, and you hear the slow click, 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 and you see freight or something, or in certain parts of the country, you just see car after car full of coal. And I remember seeing this a mile or a mile and a half long,
Yeah.
all of this coal. Now that coal is what powered all of our early industry. We're burning less of it for energy right now. We still need coal for a lot of reasons, but we're burning less of it than we had in the past. But that coal is what powered the civilization of the world in that early century and a half. Now imagine if you were to convert all the energy that we've used from fossil fuels in the last 220 years and you convert it into coal. Most of it is coal, but some of it's oil, some of it's gas. But if you were to create the coal equivalent, you're going to be sitting at that train crossing waiting for a train over 93 million miles long. It would
Wow.
stretch from the earth to
Earth
the
to the
sun.
sun. Yeah.
That's how much energy we've already used to get us here today.
Wow. I've never
Now, I'm
thought
gonna
about
talk
it
about
that
what you
way.
just what you mentioned. People don't think of it. If I said there's 1.7 trillion barrels of oil, that means nothing to you. But
Yeah.
if you envision a 93 million mile coal train, that's the energy that we've already burned. That came from our Earth.
Yeah.
That is astonishing amount of energy that we've already burned. And two things happen. Okay. One, it does have a expiration on it. It won't last forever. Now there is debates on how long it's going to last,
Mhm.
300 years, 100 years. I'm like you, I'm not an activist. It's something that we need to be aware of because we can't keep burning it forever. And that's not that many generations away. And
Mhm.
two, there's a consequence of that environmentally. What it is, we don't fully know. I'm just like you.
Yeah.
I'm sensitive to that. Most of the wild things, the most serious things that were predicted 30 years ago, fortunately, have not come to pass. It
Mhm.
just hasn't, right? I mean, there's no debate about that. A lot of crazy things were said, whatever. The worst things have not happened. But that doesn't mean it's
Mhm.
inconsequential. So
Yeah, and
we're gonna use it all, and it's gonna have some sort of environmental repercussion because we're now taking all that CO2 and putting it back in the atmosphere.
I actually don't think we'll use it all. I think that we're already moving to better sources of energy, more energy dense. Like natural gas is a denser energy source. I think that hopefully within the next decade or so, that fission plants are going to start coming online again because fission is kind of back in vogue at this point because I think we're actually like right on the cusp of being a spacefaring civilization because of energy requirements at this point. And I think that artificial intelligence is pushing us in that direction because it is such an energy intensive process that it's requiring us to put more energy online. And like as a lineman, I can tell you, it's really hard to build energy systems in this country. Really, really hard. There's regulations, there's eminent domain. Like you can build a a a gas plant, or you can build a thing of windmills. But like even the power lines, it's tough. We've used all the low hanging fruit when it comes to right of ways and building these long transmission lines. And we're at a point where we're building like 300 miles of transmission lines a year in this country. It's really hard to do. And I think that if these big companies really want to start doing this, they're gonna have to go up into space and put their, data centers up there. And I don't know. We'll see. Maybe regulations will kind of calm down and they'll be allowed to, the billionaires kind of run this country. Like the government's there, but it's kind of a hand in hand deal. So we'll see. But I do think that, like, because of energy requirements, we're going to have to go up at some point.
You're saying all the stuff that I absolutely love. This could go on forever because
Yeah, yeah.
each one of these things are planting all these seeds in my mind. So you're exactly right. There's a big misunderstanding on how much energy we have available,
Mhm.
how we're going to use those resources because there is going to be a greater demand. And you're talking exactly what is stated on my nonprofit website,
Mhm.
fusionstarproject.org, that we have to get the pathway to fusion energy. But part of that pathway, there's two bridges, and they're essential bridges. We can invest as we have in solar and wind and feel good about it, but it's not foundational energy. It just simply is not.
No,
That doesn't
it's
mean I'm anti-solar and anti-wind. It has its place.
I kind of
It's
am in a way. Like, I don't wanna have a dystopian world where you drive through Big Sur and see a bunch of freaking windmills everywhere, and there's just so many problems with it. Like you said, like, there's a cost to these things. There's mining costs, there's transportation costs, there's a windmill only lasts for so long because they've got this massive transmission in them that has to, take your spinning propeller and take that rotational energy and create it into electrical energy, and the transmission only lasts for so long. Like, I think that those are feel good projects, like you say, but in a way, you're just exporting your energy cost to someone else. Like, I live in Idaho, and I like to say that California would love us to be their battery. They'll put up a wind farm and feel good about it, but at the same time, like, they're going to be taking baseload energy from us when it's not readily available because the wind's not blowing or the sun's not shining, and then also they're just exporting that cost over to Africa, in the Congo, wherever they're mining for the lithium, or all these minerals that are needed for photovoltaics and all the minerals that are needed to create these windmills. So, like, I think there's a better way to do it. I think fission is better. I think that, like you said, gas in some ways is better, but there will be spots for it. Like, one of the things that bugs me the most about people that talk so much about solar. Elon Musk says this, and I know he knows it's not possible. So I don't know why he says it, because he's smarter than I am, and I know it's not possible. He goes, "We could build a solar farm in Texas that would be this big, and it would power all of the United States." And it's like, no, it wouldn't. Like, you would have to
right.
have people out there polishing the mirrors or polishing the voltaics every day, because you're going to get dust on them. They're going to wear out. You'd have to build transmission lines out, branching out like a spider web to every part of America to do that. And by the time it gets from Texas to Maine, it's going to be degraded, and most of the energy is going to be lost in line loss or heat loss. So, like, it's a totally feel good story that's just not feasible.
400 miles. That's it.
Yeah.
All you can reasonably
Anything more
transmit.
than that and you're
Energetic point of
losing.
no return. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yep.
yeah. So, the key of my book, and I don't want to focus on that necessarily, but it does tell a little bit of a story and kind of brings this whole energy
Yeah, yeah.
together, is the Adair hypothesis that states just what we said, that no advanced civilization can ever emerge anywhere without a dense, readily available, transportable source of energy. It can't happen. The things that we talked about, and just so we don't have to belabor it too much, because the two breaking points in my book are photosynthesis and fire.
Mhm.
Fire was humans' first technological advancement
Yeah.
was fire.
Imagine if we
Okay,
were scared of fire like we're scared of snakes.
and we were at one time.
It
It took a
just
while. Yeah,
we wouldn't be here
yeah,
talking right now. Like,
yeah.
the first
Exactly.
monkey that played with fire was a lunatic, and
Yeah,
that monkey
yeah.
is our ancestor.
You're right. And he probably did it to protect himself.
Yeah, who knows, you know?
Grabbed a burning
You
branch.
imagine, like,
Yeah,
you've got your pack of, like, monkeys, and there's one of them over there playing with fire, like, this
fire.
guy's
Right.
freaking crazy.
Yeah,
A lot of his fur's
crazy.
burned off, like, what is he doing playing with this
Yeah.
fire?
Yeah, and so that was our humans' first technology. So the bridge to nuclear fusion is the combined cycle gas turbines and fission. Now, this isn't 60s and 70s fission. That
Mhm.
came out of warfare.
Yeah.
That's where it came from. Okay, we split the atom for for warfare. We found out, hey, we can boil water to this. And if your audience doesn't know this, I know you know. Almost all the energy in the past this has been created is from boiling water,
Mhm.
which is remarkable. Whether it's coal or methane or
Yeah.
other
Spin the
fuel
turbine.
oils, you create steam and you spin a turbine. So the electricity has to be generated in some way.
Mhm.
So nuclear fission and nuclear fusion both do the same thing. We're after the heat waste. We're not after the products of what they create. We're after the heat to boil water. And so the fission reactors have gotten a terrible rap, and understandably, because they are completely tied to weapons. And I understand that. The newer reactors, and you already know this, where I'm going with this, is the small modular
Mhm.
reactors.
They're
You put
great.
them where you need them.
Yeah.
You don't have that 400-mile transmission
Yeah.
line
Oh, dude,
where you're giving
if
up,
we've
oh, so
been messing around with fission for the last 50 years in the same way that we were messing around with other sources of energy, my HOA would own one,
yeah, exactly.
you know?
No, you know what? That's what I've been saying. 30 years ago, we took the wrong turn.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's entirely wrong. We've experimented. Now we've shown that it is not provide the base load energy that we demand. No one goes outside and turns the circuit breaker off when the sun goes down and the wind stops blowing. No. So you have the same equivalent energy as a backup already someplace else. So you've had to duplicate your energy sources. That's crazy. Okay. You want one on your roof or parking garages or the shopping mall? I'm all in on that. If you cut down a forest like they're trying to do in East Sacramento, cut down an ancient oak forest to build 1,400-acre solar farm,
Ugh,
that's
God.
no,
I'm from
no,
that area. That
that's
that
wrong.
boils my
I
blood.
live here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
I'm from
that's
Cloverdale,
just.
California, so
Oh, you are?
I'm
Okay,
from
yeah.
right near you.
Yeah, so people, that's bad policy, and that's part of what I wanna do along the lines that you've already been sharing with your audience. So the two breaking points in my story are fire and photosynthesis.
Okay.
So coal, oil, and gas. I worked backwards. Where'd that come from? That's our energy. That's the energy that it took for us to become civilized. I'm questioning, please tell me, what does another planet use for their base
Sure.
civilization energy? We have coal, oil, and gas. How they got here is so improbable, it can hardly be considered. It all came from photosynthesis,
Mhm.
which is remarkable. So the coal, the oil, the gas are ancient photosynthetic products that were planted, put into our Earth's crust over hundreds of millions of years. Now, when you think of that, this is what we've already burned. When you think of that 93 million mile plus long coal train, that's the energy we've already consumed. That all came from photosynthesis.
Yeah.
So to share what photosynthesis is, I've heard it sort of misunderstood or misstated that CO2 is plant food. It's a little bit of a misunderstanding. No, CO2 is the tree. It's actually the tree. It's not food for the tree. What you see when you look, I'm pointing it out there because I'm
Yeah,
seeing a
yeah.
forest.
Yeah.
That forest out there is CO2, the leaves in it, the bark, the roots. It is actually transformed CO2. It is the building product. When you bite into a crunchy apple, you're eating atmospheric CO2. When you see a rose and you touch its velvety petal and you smell its perfume, you are touching and feeling CO2. That is a miracle. Photosynthesis takes atmospheric CO2 and water, and it takes those photons that I was talking about earlier. You have an energy gradient, and it excites the electrons in the chlorophyll, the chloroplast. The chloroplast contains the chlorophyll. It excites them and it induces a current. And now you can use that current to create some amazing chemistry. So you take the oxygen away from the carbon, you take the hydrogen away from the oxygen, you combine the carbon and hydrogen, and you make sugar. Everything, everything that we eat, all of life, every bit of it came from CO2 and photosynthesis. There's no exception to that. So that provided two things for us. One, for 2 billion years after life was presumed to have started by through abiogenesis, 2 billion years, they're farting around as single-celled organisms
Mhm.
until photosynthesis came along.
Mhm.
And then photosynthesis gave us the surplus energy where now you can really experiment with all these different energetic pathways. And now you're able to fuel energetically DNA to experiment. And suddenly, and that's what people wonder, well, why did suddenly we have this Cambrian explosion where for 2 billion years we had single cell organisms?
Hmm.
Then we have the giant dinosaurs marching around seemingly out of nowhere. Well, from a geologic time point, it seemed like a relatively short period of time. I mean, a million years is still impossible to comprehend.
Yeah, for us,
But,
but
but
in the
photo,
overall,
yeah, the overseeing
yeah,
of things is nothing. So photosynthesis started in the ocean. Was it a hydrothermal event? Yeah, it could have been. Warm waters? Yeah, it could have been. It wasn't a single bolt of lightning that some people imagine. No, because abiogenesis took millions of years in its own right with some sort of steady energy supply, whether it was just the heat from the sun or the light from, not the light from the sun, because it provided heat, but not light. It wasn't until the simple photosystem 2 came along that even preceded photosynthesis. So once Earth had all of this surplus energy, it left the ocean and came onto the rocky planet. There wasn't even soil. We can't imagine. Well, unless you go to Death
yeah,
Valley, out where I grew up in the Mojave Desert, you can hardly
yeah,
imagine what a barren place is. But that's what the entire planet was. The soil came from photosynthesis. The soil itself did.
yeah,
We
breaking
it
down of
terraformed.
plants,
Yeah,
animals.
it terraformed the entire globe and now it's churning out energy in ways that we could hardly imagine. So much so, and this is the dual part of the beauty of photosynthesis. It extracts the CO2, it uses water, then it gives us oxygen. The atmosphere didn't have oxygen. In fact, when it was first created in the massive amounts, photosynthesis, it was toxic to most of the life at the time
Mhm.
because oxygen is highly reactive.
Yeah.
That was the first
If
big biologic
if we
die-off.
were to make a time machine and go back to when the dinosaurs were around, we couldn't breathe because there'd be
No, it
too
couldn't. No,
much oxygen in the
yeah,
atmosphere. You'd have
yeah,
to have a
right.
mask on.
Yeah, it's like 40 to 50% at that
Yeah.
time. But here's what happened. It took your really stingy glycolysis, that's just the basic metabolism of sugars. It 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 gave it 20 to 30 times more energetic return by combusting it. So now you have oxygen. It happen that's why your body heats up when you run around because it's a form of controlled combustion. That's what's
Mhm.
happening. Sugar burns. In fact, the irony of the forest giving us the oxygen is now it can burn itself, which is the irony. So it creates oxygen. Our atmosphere became oxygenic, and we're able to use that for metabolism in ways that had never been used before. And so there's this sudden explosion of all this diversified plant life and then eventually animals. And so that's the first energy that you must have. If you don't have a rich, robust environment, intelligence will never evolve.
And I think when you're talking about answers to the Fermi paradox, this would be considered rare complexity, right?
This is part the rare this is the part of this is the rare earth, but the key is the coal, oil, and gas
Yeah,
because you can
and
have
that's kind
intelligence.
of where I was at with
Yeah,
Fermi paradoxes. I think it's a
right.
rare complexity thing. I
Yeah.
think that we're gonna have, like you said, a hard time finding Earth analogs, but I do think that we're gonna find a lot of like bacteria and shit out
Yes,
there. Like
exactly.
we're gonna
Right.
find a lot of
Yes.
single cell
Thank you.
organisms, but we're not
Right.
gonna find many brains out there.
Right, right. And that's the whole key. So all of this is none of it occurs, rather, is probably a better way of saying it. None of this occurs without surplus energy.
Mhm,
Nothing does. Not a handshake, not a wink, nothing happens without energetic exchange. Chemistry doesn't happen. Nothing happens without it. And so photosynthesis started to give and continues to give us that ongoing energy. We had thousands of years of intelligent life on Earth living very satisfactory life. When you and I are talking about this, this is not a moral judgment. That's not saying that we're better than they are, we're smarter than they are. Yes, we've accumulated more knowledge. I don't think we have any more wisdom. We've accumulated more knowledge.
yeah,
We're not better than they were. They simply hadn't discovered coal, oil, and gas.
mhm.
They were just as intelligent. If you look at the Roman
Oh, dude. I
um,
took a class in
Empire,
college that was about
oh, I
like
gotta hear
Greek.
this.
It
Yeah.
was about like Greek philosophy, and it was about fate versus free will. And you read that stuff, and like the things that the people that I went to school with would say about it. It's just like, man, these people were better equipped to answer these questions 2,000 years ago
Than we
than
are now.
we are now. And like
Yeah.
I have a decent like philosophy base to me, and I kind of understand what rights are and how, they're derived. And man, the people that I went to school with were just gone. They didn't understand it at all. And I remember thinking like we don't give our ancestors enough credit because they were far more equipped to answer these questions. Like we read Plato's Cave, and like none of them had the ability to understand Plato's
Understand
Cave
that,
in
right.
any way whatsoever. And it was a very mind, opening experience to see
Yeah.
how smart and how wise they were, you know.
Right, and that's a good word. So they were smart and wise, but they had discovered coal, oil, and gas. They
Mm-mm.
did a lot with what they had, but this is what they also had to do. They had no choice. They deforested almost all of Europe.
Yeah.
Other Asian countries did the same thing
Yeah.
because that was their source
Oh,
of
even in
fuel.
North America, there's huge meadows over on the East Coast where the natives completely deforested so they would have
Yeah.
hunting grounds.
Well, so a couple things. One, you have to feed your people,
Mhm.
and if you use beasts of burden for your labor, and many places did, you have to feed them too.
Mhm.
And so, Robert Malthus said this in the early, I think, early 1800s. His idea of the Malthusian trap was that you're limited on what biology can give you. I'm not saying this. He said this 200 years ago,
Yeah.
right? That he knew then that a civilization is limited by whatever nature can give you. So
Mhm.
two things are happening. One, the forests that you have are a minimum of decades, if not centuries old or older, right?
Mhm.
So you have forests that are centuries. So it takes a long time to put a tree up in the air, okay?
Mhm.
And it's easy to cut it down and burn it. So you're burning your infrastructure. You have to keep widening the area because you need greater and greater agriculture demands, right? Because you have now you're feeding more and more people, and you
Mhm.
keep expanding more and more. You're always living on the edge because they weren't able to control things that we are right now. So drought easily led to famine, pestilence, all of that stuff. You could wipe out a civilization because they had nothing to fall back on.
Mhm.
So that's how we'd be living like Game of Thrones
Yeah.
minus the dragons,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Actually, we and wood would be scarce. Wood would be very
Oh,
scarce.
yeah.
That would be a premium item. So,
Yeah.
um,
And I think like one of the first things that we'll do when we're able to like actually live in space is just start growing agriculture out there. We don't really know how we're going to react to spin gravity yet because we haven't really tested it. But if you can make an O'Neill cylinder or an orbital ring for growing grain, why wouldn't you?
we will,
Like
we
it,
will.
it would be one of the first things that that we'll start doing is moving food production up into space.
So I agree, and once we crack that energy and we are able to master hydrogen fusion, and we
Yeah,
will,
and
we're going to be
especially
able
if
to.
we can build like, elevators, which is
Uh
gonna
huh.
like, if we could build an elevator, if we figure out carbon nanotubes and we're able to build stuff like that, we can be sending stuff up and down all day, every day. Even orbital rings, like you can have an orbital ring around the Earth with tethers that are, have different deals on them. You can use launch loops. There's so many different ways that we can go beyond rockets in the next 100 years.
And that's how we have to frame it. Is that I won't be, and there's a good chance you won't be around to see all of this. But we are planting the seeds right now. We are shaping idea. We are shaping thought. We are shaping policy to direct the maximum use of our resources. That we have to understand there is a limit to it. Not in a hair on fire or the sky is falling type of way, but just very grounded, sensible way that we need to focus our attention on for the short term. One quarter of the world's population does not have access to electricity,
Yeah,
either none or very intermittent.
yeah,
2 billion people. And what are we telling them? You have to build solar farms
yeah,
and windmills. No, that's energy colonialism. That's wrong.
yeah,
We can dispatch these combined cycle gas turbines. And for your audience who may not know, I'm sure most of them already do. Um, it's a turbine that spins, but it doesn't boil water. You're actually generating electricity from the turbine that's spinning, just like
yeah.
your jet engine.
Yeah,
Okay,
there's
so there's
actually
no
a
water.
fusion project. I don't I It's called Helion Fusion. They're doing H3, helium-3 fusion, and instead of boiling water, they're using electromagnetic fields to
Mhm.
kind of take
Spin
the
the
energy,
right,
you know what I mean? It's
right.
interesting.
So we can dispatch these gas turbines almost anywhere on the planet
Mhm.
in a very, very short period of time and start providing energy, electricity for people who don't have it.
Yeah,
We're
and
we're sort of US centric. It's hard for us to imagine turning that light switch on day after day and nothing happening.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a frustration
yeah,
when we have a power outage. That actually doesn't happen that often.
yeah,
I live in the mountains. I have more than I want,
yeah.
and maybe you do too.
You know, one of the things I say on this podcast from time to time, and I kind of do it to troll a little bit and piss people off, but I think it is actually true. If you ask any normal person in this country who was our most environmentally, or like climate change friendly president, you know, most people would say Barack Obama. And that would make sense if you just don't think about it, very deeply. Oh, he was a Democrat. He kind of, you know, pitched climate
Projected that.
change. Yeah, he projected, but it's actually George W. Bush. George
Yeah,
W.
yeah,
Bush was our most environmentally sound
right.
president because they got into fracking, and fracking dropped our CO2 emissions in this country by 40% because we went away from coal and into natural gas. And I
Right.
would go a step further and say that that never would have happened under Al Gore. It just wouldn't. Al Gore would have
Wouldn't
done a
have.
bunch of climate projects. Nothing would have got done. It would have been a lot of talk and a lot of projection and a lot of virtue signaling, but nothing really would have gotten done because we still need to create energy to live. And there just wouldn't have gone down that route. And I think it's also a great way to look at energy production as a economic driver. You're going to go to the cheapest and most efficient sources of energy naturally because that's just how economics works.
Yeah, the economics and energetics is what drives that.
Mhm.
I completely agree. And now we've spent 30 years figuring out that that doesn't provide us the baseload energy that we need.
No.
And
It's
the
gonna
other
be
thing
tough
that's
to expand energy infrastructure in this country in the next 50 years. Like, I it's gonna be possible to put fusion plants or fission plants, like, if fusion's gonna be a while before they can be small
right.
enough to be, locally utilized, but, like, if we can get these small modular reactors going,
Yes.
we can drop
Right.
them into cities, you can use
Yes.
the existing infrastructure, you might have to upgrade the electrical systems, like, that's what I did when I worked in North Dakota, like, North Dakota, you know, when I was working up there, we were drilling for oil. That was what was happening. But also at the same time, there was 500,000 people living in a town that had infrastructure for 5,000. So our entire job was upgrading infrastructure so it could, utilize energy essentially. So we would go and take this old, power line that was a copper line that was built in the 50s after the war, and we would upgrade it to ASCR, and it would, power the entire area a lot better. And this is just what we did over and over. And you can do that here. You can do that where I live. You can do that where you live. You can drop a nuclear reactor. They're making these things now where they're saying you could put one next to a McDonald's and it's not gonna no free radiation is gonna escape it and
Oh, the small
taint your food.
modular
Or yeah,
reactors?
they're so
Yeah,
safe.
you bury them 3 or 4
Yeah,
stories under the ground.
yeah, they're
No one
insanely
sees them.
safe.
There's nothing. It
And you can
literally
even do like a molten salt reactor next to it.
molten
So
salt
or
re
like
molten
you
salt,
can
right? Yeah,
you can keep that
yeah.
salt hot and it'll stay hot overnight. And there's just so many different. One of the main problems with nuclear is that it was a naughty word for the past 30 to 40
Yeah,
years,
exactly, that's what I
and
said,
all of
yeah.
our best engineers went into tech, and none of them went into nuclear engineering because there was
No demand for it,
no demand, there was no
right?
jobs, like, you weren't gonna make a lot of money. Now that these things are becoming, popular again, we're gonna have good engineers who are gonna come in and figure out some really cool shit.
Yeah, we really are. In fact, the thorium is ultimately where we wanna go. The
Yes.
beauty of the thorium is it's non-weaponizable,
Mhm.
or more or less so. And so you completely remove that element. It doesn't have the uranium in it.
And that's one of the things
The
that bothers me about so much about, like, they talk about Chernobyl. Chernobyl was a bomb factory. It wasn't an energy
a nuclear I
production
know it.
plant. Like, it was a
Exactly.
bomb factory.
Yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the misunderstanding because they were born out of warfare, and all those early reactors were made for weaponizing
Yeah.
uranium. And so the fact that it produced heat energy was a remote secondary benefit of it.
Yeah.
And so the nuclear reactors that are made today are completely different.
Yeah.
They're made entirely different. We
And they were
understand
even
the safe.
safe in the 50s. Like 3 Mile Island had a full on meltdown and nobody got hurt. You know,
Right,
Fukushima 1, 2, and 3 melted down. Nobody got hurt. Like these
right,
things can be made. They were safe in the 50s. Like it was
right.
just this rent seeking behavior where people got afraid of them. And then the nuclear industry, instead of being a responsible industry and calming people down about their fears of this, they came in and said, oh, no, you're right. These are dangerous, but we have the engineering solutions to fix them. So give us more money.
Right. Yeah. So we took a wrong turn at that point,
Yeah.
and we didn't. But the future is ahead of us, and
You know, one more quick quibit
oh,
about
go ahead. Go ahead.
nuclear is like, I don't know if you've ever read Isaac Asimov's Foundation, but there's like it's about a galactic empire that goes into dark ages essentially, and they have these crisis points that like lead them to civilizational collapse essentially. And one of the crisis points is the inability to produce nuclear reactors again. They lose the knowledge on how to do them because they're living on terraformed planets that never had oil, never had gas. They never had the plankton or the photosynthesis on them. So when they show up on these planets, they have to produce their own energy. There is uranium on them, so they're able to do that. But they get to a point where they're so decadent and so stupid, essentially, that they forget how to make these nuclear reactors. And I always like think about like we were at least we're coming out of that crisis point where we're no longer able to produce a nuclear reactor, which should like our entire civilization should be running on fission reactors at this point, and they should be running on them until we can produce fusion reactors cheaper and more readily available than the fission reactors. But we're not.
If I lived any closer to Idaho, you and I'd be having a beer tonight.
Yeah, absolutely.
'Cause
Absolutely.
that's exactly what I have been saying for decades, and it sort of have all come together in my Fusion Star project.
It's so
So
annoying to like know these things and everybody around you is just completely ignorant to
clueless.
all it, you know? And
Yeah.
it's so hard to explain this stuff to normal people and it shouldn't be.
You know, that takes me to 2 other points I don't know how we are on time, but
We're
2 other
good.
points I'd like to possibly get in. One of them is the cost of knowledge. So there's 2 things related to knowledge. First of all, you have to have intelligence. And, I was hoping to talk, and maybe if there's another time we can talk
Sure,
about
absolutely.
how intelligence actually evolved on this planet, which is very, very remarkable. So you have to have intelligence, and intelligence has evolved over the last, say, 40,000 to 100,000 years. We're about the same intelligent wise for the last 20,000 years, maybe even a little bit longer. So if
Mhm,
you're able to somehow go take a Homo sapien 20,000 years ago and raise them today, minus the hair, they would largely be as capable. They have the same intelligence, which
mhm.
is the potential for learning, problem solving, et cetera. So we've had all that for thousands and thousands of years, and we
Hunting's
put it
not
to good
easy,
use.
you know?
What's that?
Hunting is not easy. Like, these
Well, so that's
people,
one of
they figured out
yeah.
hunting, they had to figure out how to live. That stuff is not easy to do, you know?
That's where intelligence involved. Nature didn't say, "I'm gonna make a MacGyver, you go figure it out." That's not how it works at all. It's incremental over
Mhm,
hundreds of thousands of years. Well, actually, the Australopithecus is 4 million years old, right? And so now we have come a long way in those last 4 million years. Our brains getting bigger, and they became more capable. You must have a complex environment in which to work before intelligence evolves. It's not good. It doesn't evolve on a rocky, barren planet. That's not how it works, even at all. And so we were able to learn and to discover in ways that other animals were not. And so fire was our first technology. It provided, just that alone provided us a lot of benefits. And that helped human evolution. We were able to cook our food.
mhm.
It provided
Bigger
safety. It
brains.
provided light at night, pardon me. It provided opportunities for ceremony, storytelling. And so that knowledge, we've been building on that pyramid of knowledge for all of these millennia. The first major discovery after fire, 2 of them, and honestly, I don't know, I've forgotten now, one preceded the other, but these occurred independently in different parts of the world: metal and pottery.
Yeah. And the bow
We
and
poked
arrow. The bow
we
and
poked
arrow
we
was like
right, we
7 different times in different places was
oh, yeah.
created. Yeah.
Right, but in terms of what came from
Yeah,
fire,
yeah.
we poked in the campfire the next day, and we saw the shiny stuff out of
Yeah.
there. It's metal. It's like, well, there was only rocks there or whatever we burned, and they were able to figure out, well, there's something in these rocks that we heat them up, then this metal comes out, and they're able to use it and make tools and weapons with it. And so that was a discovery, and those discoveries were energetically pretty cheap and economically very cheap. And then pottery, we discovered that when the clay heats up, it turns solid, and we can store water in it. We can store grain in it, and so this is part of the evolution of our society.
Mhm.
Now, also, folks, play along with me here. All right, this same stuff has to happen on another planet.
Yeah.
You don't have astronauts just born with the purpose of traveling to another planet. No,
Yeah.
they're part of a culture, they're part of a civilization. They have this same ladder they must climb. There's no escaping it because planets are not farmed and preloaded with little green men, or for that matter, life at all. Everything has to evolve. And so little green men don't come from the planets. Little green men come from billions of years of evolution. So all these same things must happen and they must have an energetic pathway. And that's what I tell people. Do you believe in aliens? I don't disbelieve in them. My whole point is if you show me a plausible and sustainable energetic pathway, all the windows open. All the windows that we're talking about open once you have that. We're here talking about it because we have had that energetic pathway. There hasn't been a disruption in it the entire time.
Yeah.
Without it, you'll never have intelligence. You'll never have intelligence that's able to use the resources, even if they're there. You're not going to go to the stars on campfires. I'm
Mhm.
sorry, it won't happen.
Yeah.
No matter how much you want, no one will make that jump from a campfire to a fusion reactor because the knowledge in between is as important as the resource is the same. And so we learned incrementally. So those first discoveries were basically free. Look at the cost of determining if a quark is in fact a fundamental particle.
Yeah.
We don't even think of the energy that's required. We just assume that it's going to be there. That's
Yeah.
magic in itself. Just
Yeah.
like you were saying, you turn on the light switch of your proton collider, right? Maybe more than a light switch, right? And you just assume the energy is going to be there, and thankfully it will. But
Yeah.
just think
Well,
of the
kind of.
billions of dollars.
Europe is in a total energy crisis right now, but they're still
Yes.
running that LHC, which is crazy. The same
Yeah.
people who
Exactly.
are telling you that, never mind.
Yeah. Well, so somehow levers get pulled and buttons get
Yeah,
pushed
yeah.
to make things happen, and I believe it is important because it's going to give us the types of information, the breakthroughs, coupled with the AI, to begin to seriously solve our energy problem that we haven't had to think about much. Honestly, yes, it's expensive. You gripe about the cost of gas, but the fact that there is gas
Mhm.
is the miracle. Not that it costs money, but it's actually there. And what it took to get that oil out of the ground or whatever, the shale
Yeah.
out of the ground to turn it into something you can drive an automobile with. That's the
Yeah. And
miracle.
and the
Yes.
price of gas is largely a function of inflation at this point. Like we're at a point where it's never been an easier time to drill, to find new pockets, to find new reservoirs. Like we're at the easiest point of drilling in history, yet gas is through the roof in
Right.
comparison to what it was
Right.
100, 50 years ago when it was much harder to find. Like that's not a function of economics. Like that's a function of inflation due
Yeah,
to
it is.
government policy.
Mhm.
And you said something that's very important, and that's why we're at the cusp of all of this, is we have this knowledge and infrastructure in place now.
Yeah.
So all of those steps, we've mastered all of them,
Yeah.
right? You can transport your energy. That's why the transporting energy is possible. People might imagine a small group of industrial aliens huddled around some sort of fire or energy source, and then they build a rocket because they want to go to travel to the stars.
Mhm.
Well, dolphins don't want to go to the moon.
No.
Right? They have intelligence. They're
Yeah.
not capable of doing it. So if you think of all the things that has to happen and energy that has to be available to get to that point, and we are there. We're going to see now, as we have been just with the advent. I don't know how it's changed you or your audience's lives, but if we've seen how AI has transformed the passage of information and knowledge, it's really, really remarkable. And what gains are yet to be seen.
Yeah.
But that's expensive. So knowledge is very costly. So not only do we have the cost of gaining the information, the experimentation part of it, it's expensive to store it and maintain it. That's a constant fight against entropy. Look at the Library of Alexandria,
Yeah.
right? That was the lost battle to entropy, right? That things will eventually go to heat waste, and that's there's no better example than that. That stopped it. Whatever information is lost forever.
Yeah.
Yes, people will argue that the ashes are still carrying the information out somewhere
Oh,
in the
yeah. Well,
ether, right? Okay, yeah, it
functionally,
may
it's
be,
lost.
but you can never pull that back
Yeah.
together. So that's
Yeah.
how entropy works. It's the state of disorder, and so there is a cost to maintaining the information, and that's where we are right now. And I've told people, if you drive out a quirky guy like me across the country and marvel at all of the power lines of the undulating wires and the kind of robotic arms sticking out there and holding these wires, that represents 120 years of countrywide electrification.
Yeah.
We've just let it fall to what you know where in these last recent decades.
Yeah.
It it doesn't meet the current need for transmitting electricity. You've got to put the power where the people need it.
Yeah. I mean,
So
after World War II, we were building something like, man, I don't remember the exact number. I looked into this at some point, but it was like 30,000 miles of power lines a year, and now we're building
mhm,
300.
300, yeah, right. Yeah, so we're not keeping up with our demand. And that energy has to come from someplace. None of it's magic. That's we've spent this entire show, I
Yeah.
hope, convincing everybody that energy is not, yes, we see it, we hear it, but if you can't convert it into useful work, then it might as well not even be there.
Yeah.
And that's where we are with it. We're limited with those resources that provide us extractable, useful work
Yeah.
economically and energetically. And that's kind of where we are. And so what I've done is I've taken that idea and put it out in space that that's what it takes us. It must take other planets the exact same ladder. They have the same ladder to climb. There's no skipping it.
Yeah.
The only energy that your planet might have that's useful to do work. Well, there's always gravitational energy,
But
right?
that's hard to harness.
We can't harness energy from the gravitational attraction from the sun because we're in its orbit, right? So we're already traveling with our planet. So there's no gravitational potential energy there between the now if you're flying a rocket, by all means, use that planet,
Yeah.
right?
You can
So you
slingshot.
can you can
Yeah.
use that energy there. So you're that's a great example of harvesting usable gravity. It's one of the four fundamental forces, right? So
Yeah.
gravity is one of them. All energies come from those four fundamental forces:
Yeah.
gravity,
There's
electromagnet.
a potential spaceship drive that would use a black hole as a slingshot to get up to like a significant portion of the speed of light, which
Okay,
we'll never do, but it's a cool idea.
yeah, yeah. So that's a great use of gravitational potential energy. So we can't use anything except what our Earth provides us through elevation. That's it. And so that's one of them, and that's going to be limited and diffuse. And as you said, you're not going to go from campfire to building a hydroelectric dam. That's not going to happen. Yeah, all the steps in between, plus understanding how all it works, anyways. So you have to overcome those challenges. So the only one that potentially is there is uranium or thorium, and so your planet might have that. But if you're not in the right part of the galaxy, and this is where the rare earth comes in,
Yeah.
because I have a new book that's coming out just in a few weeks called Earth, the Goldilocks planet. And
Mm.
so it's
Yeah.
not just that we're in the right
Yeah, I mean,
orbital.
if you're in the core of the galaxy, it's so energetic in there that you're gonna have a hard time like forming DNA because everything's just gonna be broken apart by high energy particles and you know.
Yeah, and that's a lot of time. It's the middle stuff that people seem to want to skip over. They imagine the end, right? And then therefore, since I imagined it, it's a natural pathway. But you're exactly right. If you're too close, the energy, and we talked about that earlier, is harmful to molecular bonds.
Mhm.
That's why it's called ionizing.
Yeah.
And we're a soft target. And there has to be some sort of DNA analog evolved someplace else on another planet. We've found all these molecules, right? So we know these molecules are out in space. They just naturally want to come together and
Mhm.
form the very well-known proteins and
Amino acids.
nucleo. Yeah, exactly. And so that naturally happens anyway. So we already know that. Does life form from that? Yeah, more than likely. But the more energetic your sun's energy is, the more it's going to destroy all of that. And so life doesn't hold together in those inner planets. Plus, if you're too far out, then you don't have the rich pantry of the entire periodic chart, which we've been blessed with, right? We have basically everything that you can in more or less the right proportions. So not every planet that well, many of them are gas giants, right? You're not
Mhm.
gonna live on a gas giant, right?
Yeah, I mean,
And
maybe you
so
could have, sea life within a moon like
the mo-
Europa,
it's the,
but you're
it
not
would be the
gonna
moon,
create
right?
technology or anything out of
Right.
that, you know?
Thank you. Right. That's exactly right. Yeah. So the when you get further out, obviously because of the inverse square law, you're going to be getting a lot less flux from the sun, and so you need that. It's inescapable. If
Yeah,
your host star doesn't provide you with the energy to drive life, you'll never evolve complex life. So I'm intrigued by Europa. I'm intrigued by Titan. I know that these are good opportunities to discover
Enceladus is
life,
another one.
not complex life,
No, me
not
neither, I
not
don't think
not
so. I'm
not
I'm
creatures like us.
I think it's absolutely possible that we could find some sort of life in Europa,
I
Enceladus,
think
or
so.
maybe even
Yeah.
Titan. We could find something
Yeah.
weird there. Maybe
Right.
Mars
Right.
had some bacterial
Maybe
life or
Mars.
something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not
Right.
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised about that at all. Like,
Right.
I
Right.
have no doubt that we're going to discover some sort of alien life at some point. And even within our solar system, there's two different possibilities. It's related to us or it isn't. If it is related to us, then we know that panspermia is possible, which is
Hmm.
cool. If it's not
Right.
related to us, then we know that abiogenesis happens more than once, which is also cool. You know, I guess my question for you would be, like I said, I have no doubt that someday we're going to discover, excuse me, we're going to discover some sort of alien life out there, some sort of slime or bacteria or something like that. I'm less convinced that we're going to find something with a brain that's capable of creating technology. Do you think that we'll find evidence of some sort of alien life within our lifetime with like the telescopes that we've got going now? Or what do you think?
Yeah. Thank you for asking that question. It's a great question, and it's something I do think about. And the answer is that they will necessarily have to be space-based telescopes to
Yeah.
get us closer to those planets, and we're getting better and better.
But they take a long time
Um,
to build.
they take a long time to
You know,
build, and
they were
that's
working
why.
on James Webb since I was in freaking grade school,
Right.
you know?
Exactly. So we are going to have to look forward like that. That is, they're multi-generational projects. Obviously, they've proven to be, and we need to start pointing these telescopes at planets more like Earth. We still haven't found a planet like Earth
Mm-mm.
surrounding a sun like
The
Earth.
closest things
And
are so
Andromeda,
much bigger than us.
the Andromeda, it's the wrong solar emission. There's no complex life there around this planet. There might be, as we were just talking about, there may be that bacterial life. Don't send your first ship there, people,
Yeah,
because Frank Drake and Enrico Fermi weren't looking for bacteria; they were looking for aliens. And so the answer is yes. In the next 50 to 75 years, maybe 100 years, we're going to be able to see through these more advanced telescopes the likelihood of another Earth-like planet. That's where we need to go. We need to create these gigantic multi-generational ships that may, I would say, it's conceivable that we could go point 10, maybe 15 or point 2 the speed of light. That is possible. That's I mean, I want to plant futurism in known science and physics right now. That's what I want. We need to be realistic that we're not going to just start shooting across it, warp 7 to
no,
another planet system. That's not going to happen. So it has to be multi-generational. We need to have a different purpose in life. We have to have a different goal, different intentions to make this something that's desirable globally. So this can be a project because it's going to cost a lot of money.
yeah,
Obviously, this isn't a ship you build on Earth. It's got to be around
yeah,
Mars. It's got to be around the moon because you'll never launch it from the gravity well of Earth.
mm-mm,
I mean,
no,
it's going to be 6 kilometers big,
yeah,
right?
and that's another
Um,
problem with the Fermi paradox. If you don't have like, if you're much more than 1.2, 1.5 Gs, you're never getting off your planet.
anyway, right? Exactly. So there's a Goldilocks size of the Earth, zero point 0.8 to maybe 1.1 at
Yeah,
the outset, 1.2 Earth's masses. That's it. So all that stuff matters. It's the little
Even our
stuff that's
moon,
gonna
you know,
even our moon,
without
right?
our moon creates the tides. Without the tides, who knows if you've got the energetic activity that required to create an abiogenesis? Like, who really knows at this point?
Right. Well, we're smart enough to know if we really specifically put our minds to it, a lot of this stuff can be figured out. And that's why I try to discourage the thinking that, well, we don't know everything about the universe, and it's true we don't. Maybe there are aliens that are invisible. It's like we have to stop right there. I mean, that's just not plausible, right?
Yeah,
Because where's the intelligence come from, right? Intelligence evolves. It doesn't just happen. It's not like there's an intelligence source in the universe. It has to be learned, and so we have to be at least pragmatic in our thinking. And I end my book sort of with hinting at we need to become the little green men. We do have knowledge, we do have consciousness, we have compassion, we have empathy. These things we need to take out into our own galaxy, and I
yeah,
think that we can. Your idea of going out to different planetary systems, harvesting from asteroids that may be there or comets that may be out there to get the resources that we'll need, all of that is going to happen. We can launch other probes that they don't necessarily need to be manned, and we can spread them throughout our
yeah,
galaxy with that message, with that techno signature that we're looking for, right? That we have our ears open for 70 years now to the heavens to hear, anything besides the cosmic background radiation, right? We
yeah.
want to hear something that's made by some other intelligent creature. So I'm extremely optimistic and hopeful for our future that we can, with the proper use of our resources, create the energy needed for human flourishing, for human thriving, for better equality, and to create a pathway for us to explore the galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we just need a couple technologies to kind of fall into place. We need a little bit better 3D printing and better automation. And with those two ingredients right there, you've got spaceships, you know? Like if it doesn't require thousands of humans going up into space to
And
build
it
these
won't, right?
things, like
Right,
we're going to be off to the races because the
right,
more of these once you build like a 3D printer that can build itself, you're off to the races. You've got a
oh yeah,
von Neumann probe. You throw in some automated robots, and we're off to the races. And then the
right.
second ingredient to that is we got to stop spending so much time and effort killing people and bombing other countries and put that into like discovery and human flourishment, like you said. Like that's kind of the biggest ingredient at this point is like we spend so much money on war and so much less money on discovery, and that's got to change. But I'm less less willing to think that that's going to happen anytime soon, unfortunately.
Each of those, we could take a left turn at any one of these topics, right?
Yeah,
And go
yeah,
down.
I know. I
And
can talk
and
to
I
you all
love
day.
talking about I love talking about this stuff. And the common thread behind all of them is energy,
Yeah,
every bit of it. And I believe I'm optimistic. There are plenty of differences of opinion, but I honestly believe that once we're able to quote unquote get the power to the people and break down a lot of those barriers,
yeah.
a lot of those problems that you're just talking about will take care of themselves. All of them know. I'm not that crazy or short-sighted to believe that overnight human behavior is going to change. It's baked into us. And different people have different behaviors and they have
We're
different goals and desires.
like you
So
said earlier, we're not far removed from Pleistocene era. You know, we
we're
still
not.
have the same behaviors, the same thinking. Like our brains and our bodies are wired to be hunter gatherers, you know, like tribal warfare is baked into us. And like, yeah, we've got this great technology and we're capable of doing things, but like our technology evolves far faster than our brains do.
No, it really has. And you're exactly right. And I have a subsequent, slightly different book coming out called just that. It's titled It's Never Enough: How a Brain Wired for Scarcity Deals in a World of Abundance.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're built for scarcity. Everything about us was built on scarcity. We've just had abundance in such a small amount of time that the
Oh,
evolution
I know
has
it.
not, or maybe won't quite catch up with it because that's not how evolution does not have a goal.
Yeah.
I forget that I made a mistake there. It has one goal, reproduction.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
For
if
sure.
this mutation creates a reproductive advantage, then it stays. If it doesn't, then it goes or dies.
Yeah.
That's it. And so the DNA is driving that. So there's not intelligence is not an evolutionary goal. That's why sharks and alligators are the same for hundreds of millions of years. Optimization. They're not going to
They're
get
good
smarter.
enough. Yeah. They're good enough to do what they got to do.
And they're not stagnated.
Yeah.
They're optimized for their niche.
Yeah.
Our niche had changed and we actually sought out different niches and that drove a lot of the evolution. And
I knew
so
my great grandparents when I was younger, like they were alive for until my great grandmother died when I was like 20. They grew up with no electricity. They hunted on horseback. They grew all their own food, substance living essentially, you know? And when they died, they had satellite TV and cell phones.
oh, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
That's quite a compression of time.
it
Yeah,
is. It's incredible. You know, like the things that they saw, it's incredible. We're never going to have a generation like that again where you see that much technological change, you know,
right,
because
right,
they were, you know, not far off from Pleistocene era people. Like they had a little bit better technology, they had a nicer
right.
house, but essentially they were living the same way that we
Living the
lived
same
for
way. Yeah,
20,000 years, 100,000
right
years, and then all of a sudden everything changed. And by the
changes.
end,
Yeah,
they're sitting in their couch watching TV, using the microwave. My great grandfather always talked about how the microwave was the greatest invention in history. And like I never really got it until I was older. And I'm like, yeah, well, he was, you know, had to work every day to eat. And then all of a sudden he's got this microwave dinner that, you know, just pops out of nowhere like magic. And like I can't imagine how different their world must have been, you know, by the
no,
end.
yeah,
It's
very, very
just
different.
it's so different. Like I kind of grown up in this technological era. Like home computers kind of came in when I was a teenager and then cell phones came in closely after. So I'm like the last generation that saw before and after, but it's something.
Yeah, I kind of like my age in bridging both of those realms.
Yeah.
Having a grandmother who, lived up much like you're describing,
Yeah.
just daily hardscrabble life
Yeah.
and where we are today. Yeah. So I hope, if you can, let your listeners
Yep.
know about fusionstarproject.org. Even though I wrote this book, Where the Little Green Men. May I share that for a second?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll
So
put the
this
links
is
to your nonprofit
okay.
and your book in the description of the podcast.
Yeah, thank you very much. So even though obviously I'm very proud of this book because it does approach the Fermi paradox from an energetic standpoint that hasn't been fully developed by others. Um, the thing I'm most proud of is the fusionstarproject.org, which is my energy literacy. And it talked all the stuff that we spent the first half of the show on,
Yeah.
is in there. So you're already familiar with that. And the backside of this is a little quip that I thought of. This is obviously Newton sitting under his apple tree, asking the rhetorical question, why didn't Newton go to the moon? And the answer is he didn't have the energy.
Yeah.
Now, if anybody could have gone to the moon, it would have been Newton because he figured out a lot of
Yeah, he's
these
one of
equations.
the
He
smartest, if not the smartest man in history, you know?
he
Him
didn't have the
and Da Vinci was
energy to
right
do
up
it.
there, like, these people
Yeah.
were smart, you know?
Yeah, so intelligence there's plenty of intelligence. There's no shortage of intelligence or creativity or imagination. There's an abundance of that. The bottleneck is the energy. How do you take this idea and do something with it? We have a big idea now, and that is to travel to the stars, and I think that we can, and I think that we will.
Yeah, I completely agree. Alright, Terry, it was a pleasure talking with you, and I hope we can do this again in the
Yeah.
future.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Thank you.
pick up a copy of your book, and I hope the listeners do as well.
Thank you very really appreciate your time today.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody.
Take it
Fair enough.
easy.
Bye-bye.
Bye.